This our show, and we talk about everything, and we talk about everything. Royal Flex the Brand's on Introspective Insight right now. Peace, love, and all that good stuff. I am KingDevDoe, and this is Royal Flex the Brand's Introspective Insight talk show, the Black Wall Street podcast. And this is a special edition. I don't have China or Shannon on the show, but I got two very capable, strong black women in the building. Actually, Takia.
I feel like I'm supposed to snap.
Like, who are y'all? Tell me who you are.
So my name is Takia Butler. I am the continuous improvement lead for Rochester, Monroe County's anti-poverty initiative, housed at United Way. For 3 years, we have been trying to work to ensure that there is enabled sustainable employment that is accessible to folks who are living in poverty right now, only working part-time, who deserve full-time living wages. And while we do that work, making sure that we have a system that gives them the basic needs that they require so that they can begin to work to thrive.
Boom. That's the snapping
that
right
was
there.
like, right. That's just it.
And then Haley.
I said that was succinct.
My name is Haley Cox. I'm currently a student. My main focus is child development, so focusing on like how children grow, how their environment basically affects them, poverty being one of them, other biological factors as well that can, shape a child's development. So I work with little kids. I work with like 1 to 3 year olds at a local child care center. I've been working basically with youth, birth to like 18 years old for about 5 years, in and out. And recently I started working with a financial company that helps people basically get out of poverty, if you are in poverty, or for the middle class who are commonly forgot about. We also help them to pretty much just build wealth within their family. We teach them how to budget, teach them how to save for retirement, because that's something that everybody forgets about. So we focus on those things, and we just put together a plan that is suitable for them. And we just give them some education pretty much. And we are a resource.
Dope. And I'm KingDevDoe, Dev for short. Y'all know who I am. So the word of the show is intellection. I didn't even know this was a word, but the action or process of understanding. And then the quote of the show is, a great deal of intelligence can be invested in ignorance when the need for illusion is deep. That's deep in itself. So,
That's the direction.
That's deep in itself. But we're going to get into the off topic right about now.
I know this is off topic like a motherfucker, so I ain't going to expound on it, but
Nicki Minaj retired. What y'all got on that? Because I don't want to start because yeah.
I mean, I guess she got it like that. I don't know. She said she want to start a family. So at least that's what I saw. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think that's a good reason to retire.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Like, if somebody, I don't know, I was thinking about this today. Like, if the woman says she wants to start a family, right, and she hasn't been able to start a family, then that's the answer, and that's just the end of the conversation. It feels like the whole discussion is like whether she means it or not.
Right.
And so it's like, she said it, so why are we second guessing it?
Right.
So like, if she said it, that's
she
the
got
end of
enough
the
money.
conversation.
Like, she probably got enough money to live for the rest of her life.
And maybe she's not retiring from ever working or producing or creating, but she's retiring from rapping. And I think, her numbers have dwindled, her status has changed, so it's probably a good time to bow out and dip for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Lauryn Hill is eating off of like 1.5 albums.
Why y'all gotta?
I'm just saying.
Why y'all introspective?
Like, and I still play Lauryn Hill to this day.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah.
I was
Lauren
in
is
Zion
dope,
National Park bumping Zion, feeling very black in like a very not black space.
Lauren is
it was
dope.
great.
But I mean, why y'all had to like attack that from the woman perspective? Jeez.
What's the other perspective?
The hip hop culture perspective.
Wait,
man.
hold up. So the opposite of a woman is hip hop?
What? Who said that?
You just said that.
No, I just said, look at it from an MC's perspective. Like,
Here we go.
Okay.
like, when Jay retired, he had already
He
did.
didn't retire, so
He did retire at the
that's
Black
not
album.
if you come back, that's not retirement. That
You
was
don't think Nicki
that was
coming
a
back?
sabbatical.
You don't think Nicki
I
coming
think
back?
Jay-Z took a sabbatical.
You
No,
don't
I don't
think
think
Nicki-
she's coming back.
I think so.
I don't think so.
I think so.
I think once you know, some people have the unfortunate responsibility of ushering in a new thing, and then other people get better at that thing that you did. And so sometimes, you know, there's been upgrades to the system, and now we've moved on. It's like Future.
So you saying she can't upgrade?
I'm saying that your time is finished, and you should find something new.
Ooh, that's a nice way to say
No,
you
it's
was
really
whack.
important to know this. No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not see. All right, let me go ahead and get my intellection on so I can be prepared for this conversation.
Oh my
Fix my
God.
eyebrows
Yo,
real quick.
So
that's
who do you
a
think is the
nice
upgrade?
way.
Who would you say is the upgrade?
By upgrade, I mean like, all right. So I think there's a world where Nicki Minaj did not do so much exacerbated, like energetic, blah blah blah. I think there's a world where she gave up some integrity, and so
I feel you.
think
I feel you.
there were more integral versions that were doing the same shit but meant that shit. Like Meg Thee Stallion looks like she means everything she fucking says. Right, and it's not like
That's
done
a
with.
fact.
It's not done with like cotton candy, like wrapped around it to like make
Oh.
it palatable, right? Like people have selected to really want the rawest version of what she offered, and
That's
she
a
did
fact.
it with having to maneuver and switch herself up. So there's like a shell she's been walking around with that you can see on her fucking face, so you can tell she's unhappy. So I don't think she's coming back because it's a world that's not welcoming her the same way it used to.
That's
Not
a
to mention, you don't know her business with Birdman. Like there's a lot of pieces to put together, like around just her business.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, maybe she's been trying to branch out. You see her doing the radio show. You see her trying to become a personality because that was really what sold for her
That's a
at
fact.
like a pop level, right? Like, because she can rap. That's not the conversation. There's a lot of motherfuckers that can rap that don't.
She alright. I don't know about all that. She alright.
I mean,
But
that's
yeah, I
another
don't know.
conversation.
That's another conversation.
She
but
produced the music that I enjoyed listening to.
oh yeah, no,
and I
no,
said
no,
those
no.
two things sound good next to each other.
Yeah, to
I
each
like
his
that.
own. To each his own.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
yeah, I just want to talk about that. I don't know no details,
Mm.
so I was hoping y'all brought the heat, and y'all did bring the heat, so that's cool. So as we move on, because I don't care to talk about Nicki Minaj. Actually, the last time I talked about Nicki Minaj on this show, YouTube didn't put it up. Like they flagged my show
Damn.
and wouldn't put it up because
Well,
we
maybe
played
push it
like
well.
30 seconds of
Moment
a
for life.
song from the Pink Print. Is
Mhm.
that an album?
Yeah.
I guess.
so.
And I was like, yo, that's whack.
Oh, that's
and-
not nice.
It was.
See, you got to speak kindness.
It was like, well, it was just a critique on music. We all critique
Mm.
music and the art of, and I just felt like it was whack,
What does whack mean?
like bad,
That's mean.
horrible.
That's mean.
I know, but
Okay,
I mean,
so-
when you put your art out, people gonna critique it.
That's true.
Is there a
And when
nice-
you're
uh-huh.
seen as, you know, like the Road Dogg, the Ace Boone Coon,
Mm.
all that stuff, you know,
Mhm.
you're gonna have to produce. Like, I feel like Meg is like on a wave right now,
Mhm.
and Nicki joining that wave, she tried to ride that wave, but
Do
I
you
feel
think that
like
Cardi B is manufactured?
manufacturer, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I think that's part of what Nicki Minaj is a little upset at, right? Like, damn, like they're like they made another me, you know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, and then
But-
like so now there's another you that did it the way you did it, and then there also was another person who comes out who's even realer than both of y'all niggas. There's like
But
the
I feel
third
like-
generation.
So, one thing Meg has is the actual realness of her body, and
And the realness of her
and
intentions.
the
like, she
realness of
really
her
feels like she
intentions, and
means
that's so. Even though Cardi didn't have the realness of her body, she has the realness of her intentions. Like Cardi is Cardi. Like
All the way.
what you
Yeah,
getting
she's
from
perfect.
Cardi is
Is
what you
what
getting
you
from
got.
Cardi.
Mhm.
What you getting from Meg is what you getting from Meg. Now
because
I
integrity
hope
matters.
I hope that Meg
I think Megan-
transforms to something better because I see the potential.
Yeah.
But not better. I don't want to say better. Something more
I hope
because
she
I
gets
see the
to be
potential.
more diverse. Like she gets
Yes.
to show up in more than one way.
Yes.
Yeah.
The problem with Nicki is she lost herself somewhere down the line. Like every time I talk to somebody about Nicki, they talk about like Itty Bitty Piggy or like her freestyles from back in the day. Yeah, that's the hungry, like, this is me. But as she grew, she lost herself. And one thing, if you listen back to the shows that I always say about Nicki Minaj is I feel like she's trying to be somebody she's not. And somewhere down the line, that catches up to you. So that's the only reason why I say, like,
So
And
I
then
have
that alone.
three principles that I always say I care about: grace, integrity, and love.
Oh, I know about it.
Right. So we've had many a conversation on a bench someplace like, look, you got to understand at the end of the day. And I think the importance of integrity is being authentic, right? And being vulnerable, being willing to be who you actually are, and kind of trust in the process that if you show up as a truest version of yourself, that God will reward that with the things that you need, right? So there's like all these sort of books, but there's this book, The Alchemist, and the general like motif is that like
I used to play that game, The Alchemist, by the way. Mm-hmm.
when you choose to live in your purpose, the universe will conspire to help you achieve it. Like when you make that decision to live in your birthright, like you will shine and the right shit will be attracted to you. You just got to trust that that's going to happen. And that requires authenticity. Like you can't be clouding your own voice with a whole bunch of bullshit because people can't see through that.
Mm-hmm.
People are not mind readers.
Mm-hmm.
So integrity is important.
Yeah. Dope. So with that being said, I'm done talking about Nicki Minaj. I salute you on your accomplishments in your retirement. I hope you build your family and be happy
like
forevermore.
Boom, boom, boom. Pa, pa, pa.
There you go.
I don't know. My reggae sounds are
yo,
Not
I'm
my
about to have
talent.
you in the booth recording my sound.
I was watching the Yardie yesterday, and I just feel like Idris did a lot. That's another conversation.
So the topic today, because this is a poverty special, so we got some poverty experts and soon to be expert specialists on the show today. So we're gonna get into the topic of poverty in our community, because this is the Black Wall Street podcast, which means the focus is empowering our people and building that self-sustaining mentality that Black Wall Street was built upon. So Haley actually approached me, messaged me, hit me up, and asked me to come on the show to actually talk about poverty and its effects on the community and how we can kind of come up with practical solutions to combat poverty. And it was just, mindless to bring Takia on the show because she's a walking book is how I say it. She's a walking book. So
I be reading. I be reading.
Let's just indulge in this conversation on poverty. Haley, you already know you starting. So poverty, what is it? What you got for us?
Well, I just want to say thank you for setting this all up. I think that is dope that there's someone in the community that gives people an opportunity to talk about these things. These things in my mind, I tell my husband, I'm like, I don't know who to tell. I don't know how to get these thoughts out of my brain. I don't know how to make them manifest. I pray and I'm like, all right, Lord, what do you want me to do? Who do you want me to talk to? All I can think of is I ain't got no money. So I can't start any businesses at this point in my life. Yeah, I do believe that that's in my future, but I see vacant buildings. I'm like, oh my God, that could be a learning center.
That's a fact.
That could be
I be doing
a
the
Black
same
owned
thing.
bank. We just got all these vacant buildings. So
You got
I'm
vision.
hoping, and I feel like it's just all urban decay. When I go to the suburbs, I'm like, yo, all I see is land and buildings with people in it. You know what I mean? So the first question that I want to, shoot out there is, why are we in poverty? And there's so many things that go into that. You know what I mean? Some people can say it's slavery. Some people can say, oh, it's your fault. It's your fault why you're in poverty. People keep having kids. There's so many reasons. But what I believe, just by learning, because I'm currently in a class where all we talk about is poverty. So I recently have started reading on this, and I am seeing the history and the data and all that stuff. So it's starting to make sense to me. And I think that our country as a whole, they have adopted this individualistic approach where it's survival of the fittest, that Darwinism type of mentality where it's if you don't work for it, it's not going to happen.
Right.
You know what I mean? And if you work for it, it's going to happen. But we know that some people definitely get a better start than other people. And you definitely are not going to end up in the same place. You might finish, you know what I mean? You might get to the end, but it's definitely probably going to take longer. You're probably going to have to work extra hard. You know what I mean? You're going to have to try your best to put yourself in a position where you can get around people who are more educated and, you know, have been places you've never been, have been out of the country, you know what I mean, have been to school. If you're just, you know, sitting at home, hanging out with your friends who, you know, don't want to work, just want to smoke weed, want to get drunk, want to have sex, then
Procreate.
you're probably not gonna get anywhere. And that goes to another idea of poverty that I believe is a reason why more of our people are in poverty, is because poverty creates a culture in a culture. Like it creates this culture of poverty where my parents was poor, and because my parents is poor, most likely I'm gonna be poor, because that's all you see. And it's like a never-ending cycle. It's like
a perpetual cycle.
It's
yeah.
like bondage. You know what I mean?
That's real.
So those are my first thoughts.
I would say I have a few things. So why you asked the question, why are we in poverty? So we have a few. I've had a ton of conversations that kind of touched on this, almost like the state, why the inner city has less resources than the suburbs. And
when you say resources, what do you mean?
Like just why we get the last bit of resources that's allocated. So, for example, I was looking up, I think it was education. I feel like it was education. We had a show on education, and I was looking up, you know, why is there a difference between, you know, suburban education and urban education? And one of the things I came across was when communities were being formed back in the day, all the elite or people who were seen as elite stayed outside the city, and everybody who was seen as not elite was pushed in the city. And that's how they kind of gauged where all the funds, all the money, all the resources was going to, and then everything that was left over was pushed into the city with all the people who weren't elite.
Yeah, I think what you're speaking about is redlining. To some degree,
So
right?
that was the second.
Right. So redlining meaning, well, so there's a couple of important like keywords, right? So redlining, Great Migration, economy. There's like a couple of different things here, right? So my like academic background is economics and economic development, right?
Gotcha.
So that's like the approach that I take to this conversation. And then my like graduate studies is in like community and social change, right? So the universe brings you into this space where now it's like my job is to do these two things together. So when Rochester was really thriving in like the early 1900s, there were barely any black people here, right? It was a primarily white city. And it's really not until, and feel free to correct me on this if I'm wrong, but like the 40s, 50s that you even start to see a trickle of black people, like 7,000 black people, right? Because of the Great Migration, you see this boom of black folks that come up here, a lot of them with agricultural backgrounds, because a lot of black people first came to Sodus because there was work there, right? So everybody's got a cousin that lives in Sodus. I've got cousins, like your country cousins that live out in Sodus. That's where a lot of people came first, right? So then between like that 1940, 1950s era to like 1960s, 1970s, you see this explosion of black folks, right? And while you see this explosion, we're relegated to very specific corners of the inner city, like very specific wards, right? And those wards, and there's this guy, Simeon Bannister, who works at Community Foundation. He does a really good historic presentation on this. He's like, you know, Rochester born and bred, like into the history, and he talks about how depending on where you were coming from, so if you were coming from like Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, you ended up on the east side, and if you were coming from like North Carolina, like more like northern southern states, you ended up on the west side. So the beginning of the east side west side beef is like partly related to the Great Migration. It's crazy. Right. And so let me start by stating my family's mad east side, right? So like South Carolina, Georgia, big Georgia energy, right? Yeah. So like very entrepreneurial, very get out and get it. And there's something to be said to that, to your point around how your conditioning becomes conditioned because you're living in poverty, right? So like this multi-generational poverty that like you continue to, it's like you build habits of survival as opposed to habits of thriving. You struggle to build certain behaviors because there's nobody around you doing them. You lack social capital that's diverse enough to teach you a lot of different options. And so you just continue to do the options that are in front of you, right? So I'm watching snowfall, right? I was talking to y'all about that earlier. And it's just so interesting to watch there's this part of Black history that we don't talk about, like the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
It's like here's the story. Like, we were slaves, then y'all wasn't, and y'all kind of was shining for a little bit, but then racism, our bad. And then, like, y'all was trying to get free. So then MLK came through and we was like, all right, y'all shot him. Like, all right, we got to chill. We got to figure this out. So then we gave y'all some civil rights or whatever, but we ain't renewed them shits like a couple of years ago. And don't ask us about that shit. But anyway, though, so y'all got free. And then y'all was on y'all Black Panther shit and we was like, chill. And then it was a little bit of gun rights, because the only time we do gun rights is when Black people was buying guns. And then y'all started doing like entertainment shit. Then it was just like y'all was playing baseball and y'all was in the sports and y'all was integrating. You know what I mean? Look at y'all playing sports, being strong. And then Whitney Houston, and then Michael Jackson, and then crack, and then Obama. Like, that's Black people. That's like how America tells our history. It's very ridiculous, right? So I feel like there are all these key points where we forgot that the real issue is that Black folks came into bigger and larger cities with very limited skill sets, not able to get the access to employment or to live in communities where they could build the relationships necessary to get access to that employment.
Exactly.
Right? Because people put their cousins on, people put their family on, people connect people
Nepotism.
they care about to opportunities because they want them to thrive. When you're not individualistic, right? When you see somebody as a part of your same group, as a part of your tribe, you're going to do everything you can to support them. That's just how people operate.
Right.
Now, if we saw everybody as our tribe, if we saw it as when I hurt you, I hurt myself, if that was the dynamic and the undercurrent of our relationship, if that was the culture for everybody, we'd be having a different conversation.
Ubuntu.
Because Ubuntu, right? So the reality is, like, for so long as I don't think you deserve what I deserve, then it doesn't matter that you're struggling.
Right.
So there's lots of people that poverty boils down to, I don't have enough resources to pay for the things that I need to survive, the things that I want at the quality in which I want them, right? So it's not that there are poor folks who are living in these affordable housing projects, but them shits are low fucking quality. And when are we going to have the conversation? When are we as a community decide that this is our threshold for what people deserve? That everybody deserves a right to actively participate in the same market. Because what's happened is we've created a secondary market that's heavily subsidized for people who can't afford to participate in the real one. So y'all got stainless steel counters and we dealing with fucking laminate wood.
Yeah. That look like stainless. Like,
Right.
look like granite and
And
stuff.
because you got a couple $1 million from HUD, and so you flip that into a cheap ass building that, like, on paper look expensive, but it was cheap.
Yeah.
Right? It was cheap. And the way the whole structure is set up, the way the tax benefits work 15 years from now, I'm not about to reinvest in that property because it doesn't bring me any profit. The real reality is pay people money so I can make my own choices to actively participate in the market. Look how much money we spent for Popeyes.
I ain't spending money.
Well, I bought a sandwich and it was not good. And I feel like I asked for a spicy and it wasn't spicy. And I really honestly wanted to hire the lady at the register because the way she handled herself was just so, like, amazing. Like, she just took a deep breath when somebody was yelling at her and, like, looked him in his eye and was like, I don't appreciate being spoken to like that. How can I help you? I was like, oh, verbal judo.
Verbal judo.
Verbal judo.
I've been doing that, by the way, ever since we talked.
I felt like, when, like, I think it was Players Club, or, like, when, like, an old dude comes to the strip club, and he was like, girl, you don't got to work here. I got a better life for you someplace else. That's what I felt like. Like, yo, you don't got to work here.
Oh, my gosh.
So anyways, so poverty is when I don't have enough, right? So think about you. So you work with helping folks with their budgeting, right? So every budget has an income side and an expenses side, right?
Yeah.
So there's the money you get in, and then there's the money you have to put out. Well, so poverty is when I have my expenses are heavier. Like, imagine it's a scale, right? And my expense side is heavier than my income side,
Right?
And so I can't afford things at market rate.
Exactly.
And so what we do as a community is we offer these transfer payments, which you call benefits. So welfare, subsidies, whatever, right? Section 8, however you want to think about it, to offset the cost, right? But nobody double checks the quality because there's this mindset of everybody who's not poor that poor people don't deserve high quality.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
it's like unworthy versus worthy.
Exactly. So there's a stigma around even getting help. And let's keep it real. The thresholds that we use right now have never been adjusted since, like, 1963, right? So Molly or Shanky, this random lady that works in, like, a federal department, comes up with the formula because nobody can think of a formula. I spent, like, 2 weeks ago, like, reading all the original documents.
Listen, I was literally going to say the same thing.
Yeah, and we've never
It's all
adjusted
based
it for
on
the cost of
food.
living. Exactly. And it's just based on one basic need, right? So let's say your basic needs are housing, transportation, childcare, food, and healthcare, right? Let's say those are your basic needs, right? that would be one side of your budget. That would be all the money you have to spend on those things. And the more kids you have, the more people in the house, those numbers are going to change. They're going to fluctuate, right? So there's no one like number for poverty, right? Because it depends on your family size, blah, blah. So Molly at least figures out a formula that accounts for that. But when you don't adjust for inflation, which is the cost of money, right? Because the money inflates over time. So a $1963 isn't the same as a $2019. They're different measures, right? And so we're not accounting for the real legitimate costs in every community to actually live there. So the real issue is income inequality.
Yeah.
That's the real issue.
Yeah.
There are some people who can afford to pay that and can afford it. Like their ability to afford it at whatever price you put it allows them to pay ridiculous prices for things that jack the market up. So you'll see when I lived in Miami, right? I lived there for like 5 years. And there were all these, it was right after the recession. I moved there in 2011. And all the way down Biscayne Boulevard, there are all these beautiful, like 60-something floor, like high rises, right? And at night, you would drive down and there'd only be like 2 lights on. And the reason is because a bunch of Brazilians, Russians, Chinese folks were buying all these properties and leaving them empty. Like they were just investing in real estate. So because they were investing ridiculous amounts of money, it was so expensive to live there because they jacked the price of the market up.
That's crazy.
So you can't have mixed communities because people get bought out of communities. It used to be before you had like private cars, before you had, because there's an urban economics component to this too, right? So before you had like cars, so where you could go from work all the way out to the suburbs to live someplace, we all had to live near each other. So you lived, worked, and played no more than like a mile away from each other. That was your community, right? And so with that, different people of all different sorts of incomes lived there. It was a lot harder to be economically segregated. That's the problem. And the problem is that black people are like the canaries in the coal mine. It happens to us first. Nobody cares. And then it starts happening to your poor ass cousin in the Appalachian Mountains. And then you're like, oh, wait, hold on a second. Because Becky had promise. And I don't understand. She had promise. Well, the kid in the hood had promise too. And you didn't care. That's the problem. You care about everybody that you think is a part of your group. And you don't think I'm a part of your group.
Yeah. That's deep.
That's who they are though.
Nah, that's not who they are. That's how they've been conditioned. Oppression oppresses the oppressor too. Everybody broken. So the second we show grace to each other and ourselves is the second we can move forward. So we've all failed. Like nobody's perfect in this. There's reality to folks having an opportunity to get out and squandering that opportunity or putting them self-sabotaging themselves. That's a real thing that some people need to deal with. There's families that have continued to abuse each other because all they've ever known is abuse and have knocked the light out of kids. Like that's real. And so people do have to take personal responsibility and admit their own failures and their decisions. I've had to do that for myself too. But then there's a bigger system we live in, right? And so part of the changing the system is changing ourselves, and we're not the only part of the system. So everybody got to change. I think it was on one of Dave Chappelle's Netflix specials. He was like, we can't change the system until everybody says what they did. Like everyone admit to how they contributed to the problem. And until that happens, we can't change the shit.
So our first practical solution is Kujichagulia. Self-determination, self-reflection.
Yeah. I've never thought of Kujichagulia as self-reflection. I like that.
Yeah, if you read the definition, it's all self-reflection. Who I am.
And name myself, label myself.
It's myself. Important. Introspection. What are my own emotional and mental thought processes?
But that goes back to your word of the show, right? This intellection, like understanding how you understand. A lot of people make a lot of assumptions. They make a lot of conjectures. So there's this word heuristics, right? Which is like how you, like every day our brain makes thousands of decisions. Like when you're going to wake up, you're going to brush your teeth, you're going to use the bathroom, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. These are all little decisions. And so our brain, exactly. So our brain creates routines so that then we don't have to make so many decisions. So you put your shoes here, you put your keys here, you blah, blah, blah. That way, you don't have to think
And when they not in that space,
you be all fucked up.
Oh my goodness.
So that moment is a moment of cognitive dissonance. That's a moment where what you expected to happen didn't happen, and you respond in that moment. It's almost like the same way that you can be in physical danger is the same way you can feel mental danger.
Yeah.
So someone tells you, yo, you're wrong, right? it's a moment of cognitive. What the fuck you mean I'm wrong? Like when I did it, I thought I was right. Exactly.
I'm wrong?
Exactly. In that moment, you gotta learn how to see failure as just an error signal, not a statement of your character. So the problem is not that white people are bad people. The problem is that you've been doing dumb shit. That's actually mad fucking counterproductive to everybody, and you're wasting fucking time.
You've been operating within a space of comfort.
But you're not even comfortable. Because ain't none of that shit to answer anyways. You ain't happy. It's a bunch of the middle class is vanishing.
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of people who only think they're good because they're better than somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And the second you
Facts.
stop standing on the neck of other people is the second you can fly.
You need to fly out here. Spread them wings. Drink a
Right.
Red Bull.
Yeah.
It gives you wings.
So my question is, what I've been thinking about is, I feel like you said, like welfare and like programs that are set up to counteract poverty instead of just increasing the wage or paying people what they're actually worth. Like, I know earlier, Dev, you were saying about how much you were getting paid, and I was thinking to myself, like, wow, that's a lot. I never had a job that paid me that much.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And, I hear you say, like, I want to be good. You know what I mean? Like, I want to have a nice foundation. So it's what I was reading about is this capitalist
Mm-hmm.
approach that we have,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, okay, if you can buy land and you can have a business, then you're gonna most likely you're gonna be better than someone who you have to pay,
Right.
because the person who is working for you is never gonna really get paid what they're worth. You know what I mean?
Well, 'cause
At
you're
some
gonna wanna
point,
turn
there's
over
gonna
a
be a
profit.
cap. Yeah, there's gonna be a cap. They can
Right.
only pay you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So you're better out going to start a business.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because you're keeping all the profit. You don't have to work for somebody else.
Right.
And then they turn around and say, "Oh, actually, we don't need you anymore." You know what I mean? You might be making $21 an hour, and you're like, "Oh, I'm good." But they would rather fire you and give someone else your job that they can pay less,
Yeah.
just to
The Rochester City School
save-
District just did that.
save the cost.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
RCSD just did that.
Just say what?
They offered early retirement to a lot of teachers so they can bring in more teachers to pay less, to save
That's how Teacher America works.
to save basically save money because the budget was crazy. That's all I say.
Wow.
But yeah, it's real out here. So
So I used to work for this. I worked for a place that I won't name, right? And my job was to build this institute to figure out how to teach teachers to be better teachers, right? So how to like build teacher capacity in a way that was like collaborative. And right, so what I do for a living is help people figure out like what's your North Star, like what's the vision, right? Like what's the world you want to create, right? And then what's the world you live in? And then between those two things, we create creative tension, right? So like that's the energy that continues to push you towards like something, right? And my job is to get you there as quickly as possible, right? So that's what like continuous improvement is. But the only way to get there is to be able to learn. And so you have to be learning against something, right? Like I'm trying to learn an objective. I'm trying to get better at something, be proficient. And so I would ask, like, yo, what's the purpose of education? Because at the end of the day, we're making these better teachers because we want to have a better educational outcome for students. Well, so what's the educational outcome? No one could agree.
Wow.
Is it making better citizens? Is it people who can count? Is it people who know how to file their taxes? Is it worker bees? Like, what are you making? What's the outcome? There's no agreement in education on what success looks like. And because of that, it's just a whole bunch of bullshit. So until there's a goal, everybody's just going to be circling all over the place. It's just the nature of shit.
trying to get data points right.
Right.
Like education is ran off of data points.
Yeah.
This is the point that you have to hit. So coach your students up to
So
hit
they
this
can
data
hit the-
point.
Right.
It's not. I just did a training last Thursday, and the basis of it was I've done 2 trainings in the RCSD. One, so they have tier behaviors, so tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 behaviors, and how you intervene with those behaviors. And I switched it to staying in tier 1 and created highlighting preventative practices, practical solutions to prevent behaviors before they get to tier 2 and tier 3. Because
like de-escalation.
or just seeing it before it happens. So if I know you, y'all two are my, you two are my students, and I know both of you individually, not as a group, individually, then I know what makes you tick. So if I know what makes you tick, then I can actively prevent you from getting to a tier 2 or tier 3 behavior.
Yeah.
In the district, all they do is teach teachers how to pinpoint negative behaviors. So it's a very punitive system to where, well, if this happens, then you need this is where the student goes. If the student runs out the building, then you create an elopement plan. If the student does this, this, and this, then you create an IEP. It's very reactive.
Why do you think it's what? Not only does it sound reactive, but it's very systematic.
Yes.
Right. So why do you think it's so systematic? Because it feels like it doesn't leave y'all room to like be agile. Like,
so it goes back into our conversation on poverty and where people come from and working within a system. So like a lot of the times the teachers, not all teachers, but most teachers don't understand the youth in which they service, where they come from, their story, their struggle. All they do is read a piece of paper, or they see. I literally seen this week, like kindergartner, in front of the assistant principal, I think, and she's talking to the kindergartner, and she turns to the principal and says, I hear a little stutter, maybe speech. Like talking to a kindergartner. Now, I've been interacting with this kindergartner for some time now, and I'm not a speech pathologist or anything, but their instinct is to diagnose these kids
with something,
so anything. Then they can get them.
There's this inherent belief that they're wrong,
right?
Exactly. Or that there's something wrong with them.
And this is something that it's not saying that this person is a bad person. It's just how they operate within this system.
Well, it's not about being good or bad, right? It's about humanizing and dehumanizing. So Paulo Freire wrote Pedagogy of the Oppressed, right? It's like a really classic book. You can find it anywhere on the internet for free. And it talks a lot about about education as a means of liberation, right? And so he's this Brazilian like educator, like psychologist, however you want to call him. And he talks about the banking model in current education, like you just dump stuff in people's head and then you pull out a receipt to see the amount balance. Like, I put in $1,000 worth of information, have I gotten $1,000 worth out, right? As opposed to
makes sense.
Actual like experiential like transformative learning where like the teacher and the student are one and the same and you discover and learn together. And there's a respect and honor for what you know and who you are and like a celebration of your humanity and a rewarding of you showing up as your best self. And that requires a lot more room for thoughtfulness about you. That requires rooms to not have 20-something kids in them. Like it requires like the ability to build like intimate relationship and know and understand, to have like tacit understanding, to have wisdom. And you can't have that. You can't even begin to build that if somebody is giving you this regimented way of making decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just not agile enough.
Right.
Yeah. And y'all ain't paid enough. That's another conversation.
That's another conversation. But yeah, so that was the first training, and in terms of just being able to identify preventative ways to prevent this behavior as opposed to waiting for this behavior to happen, which they're trained to do, and then intervening. While if anybody blacks out, there's no stopping that person. There's no reasoning with that person until they come back down to a level of reasoning. And then the second one was meaningful relationships. So building meaningful relationships within the classroom with the individual as opposed to with the class. And it again, that goes back to understanding who you are first, which that's how I started. Which we was talking about it earlier, and that's one of the reasons why the teacher cried during the training. But understanding who you are first, reflecting on who you are first, so then you can put onto your students what you already understand. So if you understand yourself, then you can better understand where these kids come from individually and not as a whole, because each student has their own story to tell, walk of life.
So I'm sitting, so a large part of my job is creating the conditions for change, right? And so there's these like areas in which you can have people practice new skills, right? And when they practice new things, then you can start to kind of be like, okay, this is a new level of awareness for you, right? Like, this is some new shit. You ain't never done this before. You ain't never been here before, huh? Right? And they're like, yeah, I have it. This is crazy. And you're like, all right, cool. So are you willing to change that belief you had that this was impossible?
Right.
Right? Like, that's what I do for a living, right? And so there's areas in which you can change people's thought process. And it's in the theory, like, underlying what they believe, like the shit under the iceberg. Like, so as opposed to looking at people's weaknesses, do you look at their strengths? Are you practicing asset-based community development? Like, the first thing I'm going to ask you is what you're good at, not what your flaws are. The first thing I'm going to do is try and see where you shine, not see where your darkness is, and then call you by your darkness. Like, I'm going to call you by your light, like the things that I see in you that are good, right? So you started with the theory. Then there's like the methods and tools and like how you go about doing it, right? So we use this like results-based accountability. So it's like at the end of the day, did you do the thing you said you was going to do? If it ain't that, then we don't care. And the last area is the infrastructure, that like you can change the way you do things or the structure you build around you in order to produce the outcomes that you want. And you're never going to keep structure just because you said you was going to have structure. So if you don't need a board, don't have a board. If you don't need working groups, don't have working groups, blah, blah. So I'm switching one of the ways one of these groups works together into like a community of practice, right? Which is all these people who do the same work, sharing the knowledge that they have around a particular issue, right? So they share their strengths, they share their weaknesses, and they learn from each other, creating this like shared understanding that then they go back out into the world and make decisions with that shared understanding, because now you've heard it from all these different perspectives and gotten tools to help you. It builds trust, it builds community, right? It's this community of practice. And so one of the women is like, wait, so this is when like the service provider's like, this is about like me changing like my organization? And I was like, yeah, because y'all the system. So yeah. Right. And she's like, well, that's people aren't gonna want to change. And I was like, all right, look, because I've been struggling with like talking about like my faith in my work, because it's so rooted in faith. Like all of this change takes like faith in something that you can't see. Right. Like, of course it's mad easy to be rude and unkind in a world that like is rude and unkind. Like, and that's the problem with capitalism, right? It says one person is zero sum. Like, it's winner takes all. Right. Like, there's never a situation where we share. Like, to share is to lose. And like, that's the problem. Right. There's this like assumption that there's never enough and we got to fight against each other for it, as opposed to like, yo, trust that God will give you what you need to thrive so long as you live in your purpose. Yeah. Like, that's why you got to start with knowing yourself, because I show up in the world as a reflection of myself, not as a response to you. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, I am who I am because that's who I am. That's it. Facts. Right? So the sooner we get organizations to operate like that, the better. So I'm struggling with this, with talking about my faith, but I was like, forget it. So I'm like, look, this is a continuum, right? You got fear over here and you got faith. And you just gonna have to decide which one you're gonna live in. I'm not about to go back and forth with you about who don't want to change. If you don't want to change, then you don't got enough faith and this ain't the room for you. But we're not gonna build a room of fear because you scared. That doesn't make sense. Like, the whole role is I have like these annual goals every year, and one of my focuses this year is to be like light in desolate arenas, like to shine, like to be like, no, we're not doing that dark shit anymore. We're not like dehumanizing people. We're not throwing people to the side. We're not canceling people. We're not treating people like shit, because that's the root of the problem. So we're not doing that here. And if you can begin to change that and create a space where people practice kindness, then that gives them the belief that it's possible. Yeah. And when you see people being kind on purpose, you're encouraged to do the same. Yeah. And I really genuinely think that's the root of poverty. I really genuinely think that. I think that, and then you should just pay people more. Like, to just be like, just to get out the clouds. You should just pay people more. Just pay people more. At the end of the day, all this money that we allow to live is distributive injustice. Who gets the benefits and who gets the burdens?
Even, I was just actually talking about college, because I've been on this, like, I've been in this space of growth to where I'm needing more growth now. Just from where I'm going, where I see myself going, my vision for everything that I'm trying to do, I need more growth. Not necessarily to go to a job and say, here I have my bachelor's or here I have my master's, but for me to go out and jumpstart the process of understanding what it is that I want, what it is that I need, what it is that I really expounding on the thoughts and the knowledge that I have already, and whatever. And I was just talking to one of my coworkers, and she was talking about, so I have this thing where I'm not paying for school anymore. Like, it's either it's one of the things. It's either for the student birth. Yeah, so it's either I'm getting scholarships, I can pay my way myself, or somebody just gonna sponsor me, like one of the three. But I'm not doing this financial aid thing. Sugar baby, kind of sponsorship. Yeah, whatever. I can,
patron.
Something I can, whatever. If you gonna pay my way, you know what I'm saying. And she was talking about how her son got into Morehouse, and how he couldn't afford it, and then it was some organization like that's supposed to help. Maybe it was, I don't want to say United Way or Urban League.
Yeah.
Urban League was they called to, because he was a black scholar or whatever, so they called to try to get scholarships, and the dude was like, well, maybe he shouldn't go to Morehouse because he can't afford it. And the idea that all this money is out here. So we started talking about how all this money is out here, and you can't really take no as a answer.
Yeah.
Like even with the schools, call the schools because they have a buku load of money.
Oh, when I went to
And
watch you, they definitely was like, hey, this the person you go to, you cry.
yeah, like
and then he gonna give you a grant.
right. So and then
This
it went into like when I applied for St. John's University out of high school, they denied me. I wrote a letter. They sent an acceptance letter and $20,000 on top of that. Like even though they told me I had to find $20,000 more in a week, but it's just it goes into the fact that all this money is out there.
But
they
make it so hard to
hoard
get it.
Yeah, they
Well,
hoard
also,
it.
They make it so
college
hard
is
to-
mad heavily subsidized by the federal government,
Oh my
which
goodness.
has allowed the tuition costs to balloon. They have built little cities on these campuses. These
It's
campuses
crazy.
operate
Ohio
like towns.
University, Akron. Is it Akron, Ohio? Akron, Ohio? No, not Akron, Ohio. Wherever Ohio University is, that whole town is Ohio University.
Listen, it's happening to Rochester.
I feel like
That-
U of
yeah,
R
U
has
of
its
R.
own zip code.
U of R. U of R took over all of Plymouth, like that whole strip
Exactly.
of Plymouth.
They are on
And I'm just
Arnett.
like, why do they
Arnett
charge
and
people
Woodbine.
$50,000?
They
Yeah,
are over by
and then-
Genesee Park
right.
Boulevard.
50,000?
They are over by Genesee Park
Like
Boulevard.
every year, you got to get 50,000 from one
And
person.
some people's parents write checks.
That is
Let's talk
ridiculous.
about systemic
I'm
racism.
just like, where is all the money going?
Let's
though?
talk about structural
Where
and
is
systemic
all
racism.
the money going?
Because the assets that your generations have built to be able to allow you to afford to take the second mortgage out to pay for your kids' college, to write the check.
Hello.
That house money came from that house that you were able to buy because your grandpappy fought in a war and got a GI Bill and got
Yes.
the ability to purchase a house that my grandpappy couldn't.
gosh.
And he fought in the same war right next to your ass.
Oh my god.
Facts.
There's all these times and places where black people were explicitly excluded
Excluded.
from economic opportunity.
For whatever reason.
And then those things built assets
Mhm.
that turns into
generations.
wealth.
Yeah.
And then going back to redlining, they drew the red lines to where banks couldn't be in the inner
Yeah.
city, or where
So-
like stores or anything that will help the community prosper.
Well, the stores
did you-
follow where people live, right?
Mhm.
Which is why they now move out to the suburbs, and everybody moves out to the suburbs.
Wegmans
'cause
did
that's
that.
where the-
Wegmans is like a
Well, did you guys know that
don't
that
get me started.
5-Star Bank was a redlining bank?
Mhm. Mhm.
And
And
now
they
they
just
have the
did
grant
some-
program
Yeah.
in the city of Rochester because
To
of
make up
that.
for it. Mhm.
And I actually went through that program, and I was in the process of getting it, and I was like, and I found that out, and I was
Mhm.
like, I don't know if I want to go through 5-Star Bank now.
I mean, they're
because
investing in some other
Yeah.
revitalized Rochester stuff too. I mean, that gets back to grace, right? Like,
Yeah.
where and how, and I'm not saying forgive people. What I'm saying is know what your threshold for forgiving is.
yeah.
Like, what do they have to do to redeem themselves? I don't know what the
Well,
answer is.
I don't know. To go off of what you saying, we're saying, Dev, though, about just self-reflecting and how because I'm in the area of like early childhood
Mhm.
and like child development, I see like a drastic change between early childhood development and when you get into like grade school.
Mhm.
It's like completely different.
What's
like
the change?
like, so with early childhood, like if you're in a daycare center, they have a whole organization called NACI.
Mhm.
And basically that organization has done wonders for basically teaching caregivers how to care for children.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
and they basically,
Like
it's
any
like a,
caregiver, like a family member. Or
yeah, so
okay.
like, well, yes. So they do a lot of things basically within the center. So that's how daycare centers are getting qualified these days.
Gotcha.
So if you want to be known as like a good daycare and like qualified, and you know you provide quality to the kids in your daycare, you want to get NACI certified.
Oh, okay.
So you have to basically, change some things up, change up curriculum, you know what I mean? Work it so that it is in the best interest of the child. So you have certain protocols, certain practices in place that incorporates the parent into, the center. And so with that, it really talks about self-reflecting. It basically teaches you how to be a good person so you can be around kids. You know what I mean? And I feel like it takes a lot in order to take all that in. You know what I mean? It's like you can't just, you know what I mean? Like if a child is biting, and we can say, oh, the child is biting, or maybe someone's biting him at home. You know what I mean? Like that's oftentimes what we say. Oh, if he's doing it, he must be learning it at home. But we don't think that, okay, well, maybe the child is nervous. Maybe there's too many kids around him. Maybe the child don't know how to talk, but this child is taking the toy from him, and that's all he knows how to do is bite. So you kind of have to figure out what is the problem. You know what I mean? Like, why is the child biting? Let me try to change some things around to see if there's the environment is a reason, or maybe the child just wants attention. You know what I mean? Maybe this child gets left alone to play by himself too many times. So, but it's like once you go into the school, like you get into kindergarten, it's completely different.
Militaristic.
It's completely different. It's like the teachers are just like, oh, the child's bad. Like it's just bad. You know what I mean? So, like it's automatically bad, and there's no like, well, let me change what I'm doing, or let me try to change the classroom.
There's no self-reflection.
So that it's, you know what I mean? It's more suitable to the child.
So when I was trying to build this institute, right, one of the key parts of the strategic plan I suggested was organizational slack. And so basically what it means is like you're not, say you have a 100% health bar when you come in on Monday, right? The work that you do should really only take up probably about 65 to 70% of that bar, because you need time in your day to think about how to do it better, how to process what you experience, to take the notes, how to like just have downtime. Yeah. When we put too much on a teacher's block, they don't even have the opportunity to reflect, right? So there's these academic medical centers, and one of my close friends was an attending there. And I was trying to get his feedback because we were using that model to build this institute. And so he was like, yo, honestly, the biggest issue is I don't have time to do my attending work because I'm always taking care of the residents, or I'm checking on this, or I'm managing this. Like there's so much more outside of my job description that I don't even have room to process. Yeah. So it's important from a structural level in terms of infrastructure to actually build in time for people to think. Right. And not be overburdening them with things. So when you're overburdened with students and you're overburdened with the curriculum itself, when you got to manage all these things towards this point, you don't even have time to be reflexive or to even think about it. And then, that's not even dealing with racism and conditioning and how we how we blame people before we reflect on ourselves. Yeah. But you don't even have the room to do it.
Yeah. As a teacher, I find myself, because I'm more focused on the reflecting and building relationships, I find myself slacking on like paperwork. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's a lot of paperwork that you have to fill out, like attendance, daily care sheets, whole bunch of paperwork, because that's regulations. You know what I mean? So it's almost like you need more bodies. You know what I mean? Like you need 2 teachers at least to a classroom, regardless if the ratio is 4 to 1. You can have 4 kids with 1 teacher. That's for my age group. But for like kids who are like 6, you can have like 10 or like 11.
Now imagine
for one person.
It's 10 to 1.
Imagine.
And they talking
and then
and running.
Older is 15 to 1.
Yes.
Now imagine if there was a world where parents also didn't have to work wild hours to make ends meet and could be a part of educating their own children.
Come on.
Like imagine if they could actively participate in the education process, just be civically engaged, period. But they can't because they work in 2-3 jobs to make ends meet. So Rochester has one of the highest incidents of children living in poverty in the country. I think it's second to Hartford, Connecticut, and we go back and forth. We like dance around each other, right? Almost 90-something% of those kids that are living in poverty are living in homes that are led by single women. Yeah. Right? So single women, we already have wage gap issues with women getting paid pennies to the man's dollar, let alone black women who get paid the least.
Intersectionality.
Right? So, and a great majority of that group living in the city of Rochester is black women, right? Black and brown women, right? Women of color.
Women of color.
So we don't get paid enough. We got to work multiple jobs. Half the jobs that pay well are discriminatory or not good cultural spaces for women, let alone black women who have reputations of being the sapphire, the angry black woman, or the Jezebel, or the blah, blah, all these things you see in me before I even open my mouth. Right? Like the culture isn't even built for me and doesn't even allow me to persist. Same thing in nonprofits. Right? It's not no different. So the system in itself pushes me out of it. not to mention welfare and all the ways we used to subsidize that didn't allow men to live in the house. The original charity was for widows.
Yeah.
So the whole structure we have when we think about who needs help is based on a poor woman who doesn't have a man, who can't do for herself. It's so archaic and like misogynistic at its core. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just all jacked up. Like,
yeah.
So we have to start having different conversations about what it means to enable single women who are leading households to be able to not only feed their children but participate in their communities.
Yeah.
We was actually kind of talking about that earlier in the attack on the Black family structure. And when I was doing my training last week, and that was kind of one of the I don't know, segues of the conversation when the teacher kind of asked the question, the teacher that cried asked the question about why did I feel the need to establish that I was in front of a bunch of white women in the room. And that led me to actually identify, and why I felt the need to identify that it was a majority white women in the room. And she also felt that I was alluding to wanting more Black men to take their spots. So that led me to talking about the attack on the Black family structure, the Willie Lynch letter. And I asked them, I posed a question of when they, if they read the Willie Lynch letter, and they said no. So that right there alone, I was like, that's arguably the greatest plan ever written, because it's still in action, in effect today.
I feel like I was supposed to say that it's in dispute whether or not it exists, that the person was like real, but they don't know that the letter exists. I just feel like this needs an asterisk, so that the conversation continues.
Right. And then on the flip side, the theory is real. And then on the flip side, I had to actually put into context where the Black woman falls, because I ended up talking about intersectionality and how in the financial economic structure or spectrum of people, you have the white man on top, and then you have Asian man, I think it's the Asian woman next.
What are you talking about?
And then
like average wages?
Yeah, wages of people. So you have, obviously, the white man controls everything, brings in the most money. And then you have the Asian man, Asian woman, don't quote me on that, correct me if I'm wrong. And then you have the white woman, and then you have the Black man, and then the Black woman is like,
well, there's Latinx, like Latino, like there's.
In short, the Black woman is not even. It's not.
But so here's
next to
the
Black
thing,
man.
right? So they had the Black women's pay gap day, like wage day, was like a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, so they had like a rally.
I never heard of that.
In Rochester. So
is that the one where they had all the skirts on?
Nah, they all wore red. It was at the Union that's on East Ave.
It must have been something different.
Yeah, I forgot the Union offices. And so the thing about that whole like breaking it down by race, we have to be. So my background is in economics, specifically like statistics, right? And so I'm real thoughtful about how we use numbers and how like we use numbers to tell stories. So there's this thing called like a ladder inference, like, so you'll see something on a table or you'll see something and then you start to make all these inferences in ways that you make sense of it, which goes back to your word of the show, right? This intellection, right? Like how you make sense of things. Yeah, so you take data,
picking words.
You let God flow through you. You know what I'm saying? Not to you. Just be a vessel. Just be a vessel. So don't worry about it. Just be a vessel.
Yeah. That's cool.
So you start out by seeing this data. So let's say you have a stapler on your desk, and one day you come in the morning, it's like your stapler, like you bought that shit from home, like it's mad cute, it like is automatic, like, you know what I mean?
Cute stapler.
Shit. Yeah, because I read a lot of that. I use a lot of paper. I got my own stapler that I travel with. You know what I'm saying? Like I brought my own.
Don't touch my cute stapler.
It's red. It'd be like like when I put shit in it. So, anyways, imagine I come there one day and my stapler is gone, right? And I'm like, yo, where's my stapler, right? And so what I noticed, the first thing I saw was that the data was that something wasn't there that is normally there. So then that turns into information. My stapler is gone, right? Like I make this conclusion that something like is different, right? So then I start saying to myself, well, who would take my stapler, right? And then I start thinking, old girl such and such, she always was like touching my shit, right? See, that's what I'm saying. That's her problem. That's why I can't be working here. You know what? I'm about to go turn in my resignation right now because I don't even want to be working with people, be stealing people's staplers. Little do you know, you took it someplace last night and it's in the car. right? So you have to be really cognizant of how you draw conclusions on conclusions on conclusions that turn into actions.
Yeah.
So that data turns into information, that information turns into knowledge, and that knowledge turns into understanding. And from understanding, you get wisdom. And wisdom is like actionable knowledge, like what I'm going to do with what I just saw.
Right.
So a wise person doesn't have to go through the same shit twice.
Facts.
Right? Because
That's
they're
a
capable
fact.
of like learning the fucking lesson and moving on. It's very difficult for us sometimes to learn how to move on, like learn the lesson, let the shit go and move forward.
Yeah.
Right? We can get stuck in ways because we're afraid. And so when we really are talking about systems change and white folks thinking differently, black folks thinking differently, everybody thinking differently, it's like, yo, like this shit is not working.
And everybody got to think.
And it's going to
Change.
start with black people and it's getting to y'all.
Yeah.
All of your value is wrapped up in shit you can't afford. You think we holding all this debt? It ain't that many of us to be. We not all of that.
We ain't all of
Right.
that.
I be seeing y'all get kicked out of y'all houses too.
Mhm.
Y'all can't afford to live over there either. You know what I'm saying? Your grandmother should move in also, which is another conversation. How we choose to live in houses, these big ass houses, and there's only 2 people in the house. Whole fucking family should be living there. Why are we so spread out? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, why do we spread our wealth, our money, our resources in ways that don't allow us to build?
Right.
Yeah.
That
Right.
don't allow us to take the risk necessary to fully participate in the market. It's mad aspects of the market that we don't even begin to talk to black people about participating in.
Right.
And now let me tell you this. So there's a book called The Half Has Never Been Told, right? And it's a book about American slavery from an economics perspective. The whole concept of stocks, bonds, all this shit was built off slavery. It was built off the backs of black people. They created like ways to separate themselves psychologically from the knowledge that it was about selling black bodies. They created these money on money. Like stocks, future options, all that shit is playing with money.
Yeah.
It's risk, is playing like fucking Russian roulette with money. That's all
Yeah.
that shit is. And you just gotta
100%.
learn how to ride that shit. It's really a science. It's not fucking magic. You just
Mhm.
gotta learn how to ride the fucking system.
Mhm.
Mad hood people hanging on whatever street right now are capable of doing that shit. They play the numbers every day.
They play the numbers every day.
All the time. They have a strategy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're strategic as shit.
Mm-hmm.
If you taught them how to participate in the market, gave them
market?
opportunities to practice, to
Oh
build
my
the skills,
God.
because that's what it is, right? Like you can afford to lose money and learn. Or
Yes.
there's people around you who teach you how to do it and not have to make the same mistakes. That's how you build the knowledge over time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't need
That's
a
true.
poverty simulator. What I need is a fucking
Someone who can
self-sufficiency
teach me,
simulator.
yeah.
I need black people or whomever. I need poor. Let me not say black people. Take that back. Let me absorb that back into my body. You felt that vibe? That was
Yeah.
like
it
the
was-
refresh.
it was-
All right, let's reset. So, what if instead of taking wealthy people through this fake ass empathy exercise of like 5 minutes of struggle, which does not speak to the lived,
Reverse it.
ongoing, consistent trauma that is poverty, is the looking behind your back, is the
Trying to get them to
spending-
give something.
Exactly. What if
Yeah.
instead we took people who needed to know the game and put them on that shit? What if that was the sauce? What if we
That's
help
the
people
sauce.
understand how to learn and put them in positions to win and help them figure out their purpose and then leave the rest to God? It's not my job to like give you canned foods every day. It's my job to help you figure out how to get that shit for yourself. And maybe you don't even like fucking canned goods. Maybe you like some other shit, but you don't even know because you ain't been given the opportunity to try.
To try it. Yeah. I think that, this is an awesome point because that's definitely like my approach now that
Mhm.
I am working with a financial company that helps people do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that I don't want to say black people because white people too, but a lot of people have, I don't know if it's a fear or they don't really like getting professional help. Like they don't
Yeah.
like, oh, you're a financial advisor? No, I don't want you.
Well,
I don't
they're
want you looking
scared.
at
So-
right?
my-
They're
Yeah.
scared.
my money.
Mhm.
They're scared.
So I like to take the education approach. You know what I mean? Because it's like, listen, like I can give you a couple resources. If you don't want to use them, fine. But if you do use them, like that's great. Like you
Take it
better
one
off.
day at a time.
You're better off now than where you were before.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So that was one of my questions that I was gonna ask. Like because we're talking about practical ways to
Mm-hmm.
help people get out of poverty, and I definitely think that some type of education. You know what I mean? But it obviously can't be forced on people. You know what I mean?
Well, education
Like-
to what end? Like, is it education so that then you can increase your employment? Like, so there's what's the end goal? What's the
Yeah.
what's the problem in the system? What's not work? So a system
How
is a
money
bunch
works.
of Yeah, like a bunch of elements that work together to produce an output, right? And right now, the output being produced is mad people in poverty.
Yeah.
And that's not good for anybody for a
Yeah.
million different reasons, right? All different, you take that, all different veins. So we need a system that produces less people in poverty. What needs to change in the system to do that? Well, right now, what does it mean to be poor? It means I don't have enough resources. So give me more resources.
Right.
Like it's super simple. It's complicated in how you're going to do it, right? So one step is education, like giving people the tools necessary to be able to participate in jobs, like job spaces that we know pay high money.
Yeah.
A lot of money comes into Rochester through the Department of Defense. A lot of money comes into Rochester for R&D projects from the federal government. A lot of money comes into Rochester for optics and all these very specific industries that exist here. We need more black people in tech in Rochester. We need more black people in higher education in Rochester. That's a high industry here. We need more black people in healthcare in all different aspects of healthcare, both administrative and practical.
I was gonna say
Right.
you just hit the three major components of
Yeah.
what Rochester
And
is.
advanced
Is
manufacturing.
now.
Literally
Yep.
is.
But I
People
think that that's
came-
why it's like it almost seems like it's getting gentrified now because
Income inequality.
nobody has those jobs. Like black people don't go to school to be
But
like
remember when we came
techie
for a lot
and
of
a
black folks that
doctor.
have come here, right?
Yeah.
Like they came and their families had very specific expertise.
exactly.
And were never exposed to these other opportunities. A
Yeah.
lot of the folks who came into Rochester tends to import a lot of talent, right? And so they live in a separate world from the Rochester that's here.
Exactly.
So there's all these other folks coming from other places to go to RIT, to
RIT,
go wherever
U of
those
I.
universities have relationships with the businesses. Like that's just the way that it works. When you see black folks get into RIT, get into U of R, and are able to permeate those relationships and dynamics, they do succeed because
Yeah.
they have the access.
yeah.
Right. So the resources are here, and I don't think the resources are as exclusive as they used to be. I
Yeah.
think that like if you can get into that space and be good at what you can do, like if that's what you meant to do and you go in there and do it, it can work for you. But you
Yeah.
got to get access. Somebody's got to give you the opportunity. So in real
True.
estate, if you buy like a multi-unit property or whatever, right, you're going to ask about the capitalization rate, right, which is how long is it going to take for me to earn my money back from what I paid for this? Like after all the money it costs to keep it up, right? Like how many years will it take for me to earn, like, or each year, what percentage of what I paid will I get back, right? So it's this whole little formula. Well, what if we thought about humans with that same like capitalization rate, like human potential? Every person starts out with a certain like ability, and how much effort do we have to put into it, or how long is it going to take for us to be able to capitalize on that human's potential? Like, have we really actually given how many kids that are playing football, basketball, thinking that that's the way they're going to make it, showing up with mad dedication every day, being there on time, showing all the necessary skill sets, would probably make a really great pharmacist.
All that dedication and motivation.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like a mad talented, I don't know, it could be building yachts somewhere in Milan. Like, what if he's
It's like it's there.
yeah,
The
like, he's
dedication
that
is
randomly
there.
talented, but no one ever like lifted that in him, or he never had access to somebody who could help him get there.
Yeah.
The first person that ever helped me figure out a way into my work was a random white dude that I have never met. Like, I've never met him before. I just sent him an email and was like, hi, I see you're on the board for the International Economic Development Council. I don't know you. You live in Connecticut, but I need help. I don't know how to start. Like, I was the first girl in my family to go to college, right? Like, my parents went to college while we were in school. Like, they really were the legit, like, pull yourself up from your bootstraps. Like, we came from the hood. So when I was going to school, they didn't know how to tell me how to be in college, or all these rich-ass white kids. I didn't know how to process that experience that I was having. You know what I mean? But I knew that there were people that if I asked them, they would answer. So what it took on my end was mad courage, mad faith to lean out into this world. And then, like, I got blessed with people who responded to me. But I shouldn't have to do all that. The C student should be able to eat too.
That's a
The
fact.
fact.
Like, black
I mean-
people shouldn't have to be fucking extraordinary
Right.
to thrive. Like,
Right.
I'm on regular white people shit, and I had to do mad work to get there. That's very ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? That's quite ridiculous. Now, I'm probably going to pass y'all because, you know what I mean? I see the God in me. You know what I'm saying? So this ain't forever. But I just feel like I did a lot of work
A
to
lot
get
of
over
work
here.
just to get here.
Yeah, y'all was
Where y'all started
chilling.
at.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Where y'all was
Y'all
gonna
was
get
chilling.
anyway.
Hey.
White privilege. I forgot the comedian. He was like, white privilege is Magneto walking in the metal, just like comes in front of him.
His
It just
stepping
creates a
stones is
bridge.
already there.
That's white
No, that's-
privilege. Like, you're just walking with
that's a
no
great
regard.
analogy.
Just
That's
like,
a great
I'm just
analogy.
Like you could
existing.
do nothing
exactly.
and
So-
end up a doctor. Like
so my freshman year in college, I fell out of school.
wow.
And it was just a hard time. It was dealing with like realizing this whole world was bigger than me. If I'm I wasn't the only smart kid anymore. I got injured in track. It was all these things, right? And I didn't know how to ask for help because I'm so used to having to like figure it all out myself, right? Like one of those kind of things you pick up when you live in impoverished conditions. Like you know how to get it, right? Like you become very strategic.
Right.
So I failed out of college, and a couple of years ago, somebody asked me, they were like, "Yo, who do you think you would have been if you hadn't failed out of college?" And I was like, "I think I would have been an asshole." And they were like, "Why?" I was like, "Cause I would have thought that you just supposed to work hard. I wouldn't have understood that like this shit's bigger than that.
Yeah.
Like, and I wouldn't have had humility and like grace for other people. I wouldn't have been able to find like the empathy that I have for other people, like the willingness
that's
to
good.
like still care about other people.
That's
I
good.
wouldn't have known that unconditional love for other people if I hadn't experienced like the destruction of myself. If I hadn't gone through the cognitive dissonance and found my way on the other side, I couldn't have been able to love other people. So I think there is something to look forward to on the other side of this work. Like there's a peace of mind that people need.
Yeah.
And if we do this work of freeing the mind of people who make decisions, if we do the work of changing the system by changing the people, we can find peace of mind on the other side of that.
That's a fact.
That's deep.
Fact. So I've been jotting down some. Okay, wait, I gotta make this tidbit. When you said call, when you was talking about light, shedding light instead of shedding darkness. Or calling light as opposed to calling darkness. I was reading one of our new students. Well, I don't work there anymore, but
congratulations,
one of our
sorry.
Thank you. One of the new students IEP, individualized education plan, and there's sections in there, and one of them was like student strengths. Student weaknesses. Student weaknesses had, oh my goodness, like dash, do dash, do dash, do. Student strengths had 1 dash.
Oh my goodness.
And it said student can be kind and thoughtful, dot, or period, dot. But student, dot, 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 it was like super negative. And that was it. And I was like, well, how could we possibly, so going back to the creating creative tension, like we can creatively build something. In IEP meetings, you have the school social workers and the speech pathologists and all the help, and then you have the teachers, then you have the special education coordinator, director, whatever you want to call them.
I saw those
and
academic medical centers work. Yeah,
so they sit around the table and they kind of come up with these conclusions. So if you only see darkness in the people in which you service, then you will only feed the darkness in the people in which you service, which is another thing that I kind of touched on in my from punitive to restorative PD that I did, to where if we constantly only see darkness in this sense, we're using darkness, then we will only respond to darkness. We will only feed that darkness, as opposed to if we only see light, then we will only feed the light. We won't feed the darkness because there will be no threshold for the darkness.
That's the power of manifestation, right? You were talking about that earlier. Like, be the change you want to see. Be the energy you want to create. Like, don't be afraid.
Right.
And even in a situation, like, you might come out bruised and battered, but somebody saw you you created something in the world.
Yeah.
So I remember the day I realized you could create love. Like, you could create it out of nothing. So I had like this day where I was in all these meetings, just racism on racism, white women yelling at me, just all sorts of microaggressions all day, right? Like, it's crazy.
In Rochester?
I leave, but like a lot of my work involves me being young, black, and happy, and people being uncomfortable. So it's fine. I don't really take it personally. So Rochester's interesting.
They get in there.
Yeah, it's
At least I'm noticing it. I didn't notice it as much like maybe a couple years ago, but. And I don't know if maybe it was just there. I just wasn't putting myself in a position to see it. But
a lot of it is that people can see your light. Like, people can see that you're like strong, that you're smart, that you're like inquisitive, that like they see the potential and they see what you are now. And so, damn, if you this right now with these skill sets, you're gonna be. Let me
squish that.
No, I'm serious. I'm talking to you, right? I'm saying it hypothetically, but I'm actually looking at you. And so I think people can start to see that, and they want it so long as it benefits them. Right, but they might not want you to get bigger than them.
Yeah.
Right, and so there's that resentment.
Whole comparison. Yeah.
Yes, and so there's a lot of that energy, right? And especially when it's a black person coming to save themselves or save their own people.
Right.
There's an insider, outsider. Like, well, I can't be in the group because I'm white. Like, it's seeing the black person interact with black people and they just be getting them, right. So I got this big.
I feel that. It's like, oh, because I'm not then I can't. I feel that.
So here's the responsibility of us, right? Like of the people that are actually doing the work. Like we got to be the change we want to see too.
Yeah.
So when you see that insecurity, don't poke at it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I had a friend where I was like, yo, you know what I learned? I learned I can be vulnerable around you because you're not going to hurt me because you care about me, right? And their response to me was like, yeah, and what I learned about you is to not poke you in your vulnerable spots. And I was like, that's exactly it, right? Leave me alone and I will be sensitive around you. I will tell you how I feel about things as long as you don't, be an asshole about them. So I think we have to be very intentional about exhibiting kindness as we let people know that they're fucking up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yo, this system is broken for you too. It's okay. Come over here to the light. And it's possible. And here's an opportunity to practice it. And here's some things you can start to do. And here's blah, blah, blah. Here's some questions to think. And here's a safe space to do that in. So that's a lot of what our MAPI is, right? It's like creating safe space. It's safe space to talk about how we're failing, have the conversations, figure out what it is. Everybody say what they did. Like, we got to create that type of space. So that's hard work, man. It's hard when, like, a lot of everybody has their fears, right? So a politician wants to run again. A executive director wants to prove that they deserve to be in that leadership position. A community member wants to see change and doesn't think any of what y'all talking about matters. Like, there's a million different people sitting in these rooms that, like, have all differing opinions. And our responsibility is to manage the conflict of that situation. Because if we don't manage the conflict, then the loudest voice ends up winning, and it's usually not the people.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
So to continue what I was saying,
I forgot. My bad.
No, you good.
My bad.
I came up with some practical solutions to combating poverty. As we talked, I was jotting. Right. Obviously, in no particular order.
Mm-hmm. These are not trademarked, right? So I can take them.
Shoot, half of them came from your brain.
Okay.
It came from the conversation. So self-reflection. Mm-hmm. Being able to reflect on self first before you can put on to anybody else. Mm-hmm. If I am one with myself, if I'm living my truth, as we talked about when we was talking about Nicki Minaj and all these, as we went through the different scenarios, it was just the integrity. How do you stand in this world? How do you walk through this world? And are you trying to portray something else, or are you trying to portray the values in which you stand on? Mm-hmm. And then faith-based practices, shedding light only, or kindness. Love. Kindness, love. I'm not trying to use all your principles.
I'm going to bring it back.
I'm not trying to use all your principles, but faith-based practices, whatever you choose to have faith in. Kindness, being kind to one another, not dehumanizing the next person because of whatever. I ain't get the grace yet.
Grace. But go ahead, listen.
I super like the creating creative tension. Mm-hmm. Because I think that's what I did in my time at 34 school. Mm-hmm. I tried to create a space to which we talked, but we also bounced off each other to create this space to where we're kind of working together to build something more.
It's called dialogical praxis.
And that. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Say it again.
Dialogical praxis.
There you go. Dialogical practice.
Praxis.
Praxis.
Praxis. Praxis is the art of doing.
I super like that one. Creating that creative tension, and I'm like a creative person. Period. So that's big because the way that we approach things. I was just talking about this with my sister this morning, but the way that we approach things have to be from a creative light. Because if we approach it from a traditional light, we tend to fall back into those practices that got us to this point. Mm-hmm. Right. So we have to start to look and view and attack things from a creative aspect so we can at least hypothesize and kind of see if it works and if it don't work and what did work and what didn't work, and then tweak it so then it works in unison together. Mm-hmm. Because it's all trial and error as we walk through life. It's trial and error. What worked, what didn't work, and it goes back to that wisdom.
And if you're lucky, you got some elders around you to tell you.
Oh my goodness! Listen to the elders.
Like community matters.
Listen to the elders. We talked about that on the show. Three things make up community: elder, adult, child. To which they all learn from each other. Mm-hmm. There's no specific path.
You know what's funny about Kwanzaa? Just to circle it back. when you read Malanga Karenga's book, that like kind of goes deeper into the principles. Each principle has like an ecological perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So there's self-determination with regard to self. There's with regard to family. There's with regard to community.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like, and then us as like a Pan-African people. So there's actually like 4 levels.
Yes.
And so in each one, there's like this breakdown of what it actually means. Like, so like unity within yourself, unity within the family, unity within the community, unity as a whole Pan-African people. To like see ourselves as one.
Yeah.
So you go through, because I've been celebrating Kwanzaa for 25 years now, even though I
grew up celebrating Kwanzaa. It's like we don't do Christmas, we do like Kwanzaa.
Oh, I don't do Christmas to this day. So how you celebrate it is you go through the cycle of family and community first, and then, well, the second day is self-reflection, but it's self-reflection in the mix of everybody. You helping each other reflect on each other, but the last day is the day of reflection. So, or day of meditation, to which you only reflect on yourself in your sacred space.
Wow.
So the last day is not a community family celebration. This is a personal celebration to which you ask yourself the 3 Kawaii questions. Who am I? Am I all that I say I am? And am I all that I ought to be? You remember those from program? No?
No.
Mo used to say them all the time. But it's going back to the day of meditation.
And that day is faith.
And that day is faith.
Right?
Imani.
That day is faith. The faith and willingness to dream, to think, to vision, to like, that takes courage.
On the first day of the new year. So you kind of redefine yourself going into the new year.
So
like everything,
Yep.
Cool.
the way that Karenga did it, like, it's brilliant. And a lot of people lack the willingness to see the brilliance as we celebrate it at the end of the year. But yeah, that's a little side note. So the next one I put was creating stepping stones. So that goes into the whole Magneto privilege thing. But instead of
before you go into that,
yes,
can I talk about your Kwanzaa point?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so you know how Kuji Shakali is about like reflection, right? So I just want to lift up that like you can celebrate Kwanzaa as like a whole family, right? Which is what we do. You can celebrate it as like a community, so you can go like community events. But even if it's just you and your man, y'all can celebrate it. And I'm gonna tell you a very quick story about how I learned about somebody, right? So I do facilitation, right?
Yep.
So I do like Kwanzaa, like with like groups, right? So I come home and I'm like, hey, let's do this thing where you have to draw out on a big sheet of paper what your like most important things are. And then you basically create like this wall. So like everyone would put like their 3 things that matter to them or like speak to who they are, right? And then you go around and at first you try and guess what the person is saying. And then you have the person actually tell you what it means. And you like just get this deeper understanding of each other. So anyways, one of his pictures was something related to him wanting to be happy. And as he was explaining it, it occurred to me, he thinks other people make him happy. The way he was explaining what he cared about taught me a lot about how he saw the world. And so even if you're just getting to know somebody, Kwanzaa can be a really interesting time to understand where they're coming from and make some really informed decisions. So if you want to get to know somebody, celebrate Kwanzaa together, like for real, for real. No, like for real, like celebrate Kwanzaa together. You will understand. I just spent mad hours in Be Healthy having a very woke conversation. It was mad woke. I have mad tabs of things we Googled. But those conversations are necessary to get to know and build.
Yeah.
Right. So I just wanted to lift it up.
Cool.
That's another way you can think about Kwanzaa.
Kwanzaa is dope. So yeah, creating stepping stones was the next one. That's something in which I try to practice a lot in my theme of recreating Black Wall Street.
Yeah.
In the sense of creating a platform for creatives, people, I don't care who you are, people who share the same ideals as me, to grow and to have conversations and to, assist each other in creating this wealth, creating a perpetual cycle of wealth, breaking the effects and the stigma and all the generational effects of poverty and living in, extreme poverty and all that stuff. So creating those stepping stones for us and not for you. So you're not saving somebody from creating this by creating the stepping stones for them. You're assisting them in getting, reaching that higher level of self. And then the last one I wrote was humility, empathy, and grace.
True.
Which is all in one. Humility, empathy, and grace. So those are the practical solutions that we can start as a people, and as time goes on, you will start to see it, create a decay on poverty in general, and then we can, fund each other's dreams more. We can together open banks. I want to open a bank.
Yeah.
I literally looked up what it costs to open a bank.
You are going to open a bank.
Yeah,
Manifest
speak it.
that energy.
I'm going
Speak
to
it.
open a school, a string of schools. So
Okay.
you know how like Uncommon Schools have schools here in the
Tutoring
city and things of that
centers.
nature. That's actually one of my goals, to literally open a school,
You
because
better do
I've
it
worked
right.
in the school for the last 2 years, and I see the power that it can have, especially with the work that I did. But I see the shortcomings of the system and how it's been implemented time and time again, and with the budgeting and the school board and all these different things.
So like, this just popped up. It's mad random, but like, the black colleges, like the HSBC schools, do they only take in black students?
No.
They don't. I was curious because I'm like, if you open a school, would it be racist? It can't be racist, but would it be wrong if you just wanted to educate black kids?
No.
You
just for the
couldn't
sake
get
of
federal funds.
Probably not.
And I think that's where the line gets drawn. But that might not be a relevant point with this administration. They might get rid of that too. But yeah, you're not supposed to, not to get federal funds.
And I mean, not for nothing, with geographic location of where you open the school,
it's gonna happen regardless.
Yes, you would get a majority students of color, but so Umar is doing that, opening a school for black boys. Dr. Umar Johnson.
Oh God.
The
Is he
Marcus
actually
Garvey.
opening the school?
Yeah, he got the campus, and now it's renovations. It's the step of renovation. It's in Connecticut. And there's, so being in education, there's pros and cons to, just opening all boys schools, opening all girls schools, opening, trying to delegate, having schools just for black people or just for white people, whatever the case, right? So I feel like when we're talking about open schools solely for black people, I feel like we kind of, in a sense, fall back to that traditional, like, this is just for us type thing, when in all actuality, if we just open a school and we control the curriculum, we will influence more, and when we don't try to delegate who can attend this school, who can't attend this school. Our culture is already profitable. Our culture, they already want to learn our culture, mimic our culture, all that stuff. So if we create a school and we create a space to where it's all loving and everybody is included, then now we're knocking down a whole bunch of things of, like these teachers, future educators that don't understand the youth in which they service. We're knocking that down because now the education is rooted in these practices, self-reflection, faith-based practices, creative.
All of that lives in black culture.
Right.
Right. That, like, just teach a school rooted in our culture. Like, just teach the culture.
And it's gonna naturally attract everybody. So I don't,
because it's real.
I've in my journey, I've said, oh yeah, I want to open an all black school, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. But as I grow, I tend to start to lean towards, it doesn't matter who comes, because there's a lot of kids, they don't know right from wrong. They don't care. They as long as they show up, as long as they show up, I mean, like,
and it's important to see.
I mean,
I'd
rather people just teach the truth.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, it might suck being white and being like, oh,
and a lot of the kids,
that's what happened.
A lot of the kids operate in a space of ignorance because their parents operate in a space of ignorance.
So it's like breaking that.
Yeah.
Breaking that, like,
that
taking the blindfold off.
That cycle.
So like, nah, this is what it really is.
That's right.
Real quick before we end the show, my first year working at 34 school, I had a white boy called two of the black boys a nigger in gym, and so this is a few months into school, so I'm still relatively new, and I interact with everybody, but this was my first major interaction with this white kid. And, I'm talking to him. And I've always preached at my school, if I become unearthed at any point, then I can no longer do my job. So I have to stay leveled all the time, because then I can successfully articulate what it is that you need to know, so we can grow past this point. I'm not teaching you past this point. We're gonna grow through this. So I have to learn from you. You have to learn from me. Ubuntu. I am what you are. You know what I'm saying? So anyways, so basically, long story short, the kid says that he learned the term from Roots. Okay, cool. Well, when were you watching Roots, or what did I? Well, me and my mom watches it all the time. So I'm like, okay, well, do you have a conversation about this after y'all watch it, or yeah? I'm like, what? Are y'all watching this for fun? Like, what is it that y'all,
You think they only supposed to watch it during Black History Month?
Yeah, so
you got February to watch Roots.
So,
that's it.
So basically, he was just like, nah, we just watch it, and then that's that. So then
multiple times,
that's the favorite movie,
right? That's their Saturday afternoon. It's just on in the background.
Yeah, so we're talking, and then he's like, I was like, well, what does being a nigger mean to you? Like, what, when you called him that, what were you trying to say? And he basically told me they were acting the way that they were acting in the movie.
But
so
why?
I called them a nigger. So then it goes into that process of, okay, well, he's operating from a space of ignorance, and they watch this movie. So when we watch those movies, we have conversations.
Right.
Like, it's some type of conversation going to follow watching any of those movies. This is just naturally in us as a people. For them,
that's crazy.
Yeah, for white people,
dialogue,
it's like
right?
they
to engage in dialogue.
Yeah, they watch these things, and then it's just, okay, cool. It's like entertainment to them. Like this, they literally watch it for entertainment. We watch it for knowledge.
But part of it is that it's also how you see yourself in it. What did you see yourself as? And who did you see yourself in, right? There's all those, like, we see pain on bodies that look like ours, and a story about people that we're supposed to come from. Yeah. It lands differently on us and requires a different type of restoration. If you're just watching an act of violence on someone that you don't see is similar to yourself, if you don't practice Ubuntu, if that's not what you're built on, then you're just looking at some shit.
Right.
And you become desensitized to watching violence on that body.
Yeah.
So, I want to just tell that story because it's like one of those. They was acting like him.
What?
So he had a pre-set
a schema.
Yeah,
That's
that
what they call them, schemas.
So
until something else comes along
and kind
recreates
of recreates
the thing. That's why you gotta create the practice to try new things.
Which is why I feel like if we have more Black creative spaces, Black educational spaces,
or
to which
sometimes
we
just go outside and talk to people.
That's another
Sometimes
thing.
It ain't about physical buildings. I mean, look, every day I walk down Weld Street on my way to work, and I have made mad friends with the young men who find themselves there when I both leave my house and come back, right? And so doing whatever it is that they're up to. So when I'm walking by, I stop sometimes and ask the question, like, yo, if y'all could work anywhere or do anything, what would you want to do? Like, what would you be interested in? And, one dude says, well, I want to do, like, welding. I'm like, yo, that makes mad sense. That's mad money. Like, let me see if I know somebody that does welding. I'll get back to you. Like, sometimes it's really just taking an interest in people on the block. Like, you don't got to create a building for them to come to. Like, God is everywhere. Like, you don't just have church in a church.
Yeah.
Like, you can have it any place. You can have praise and worship any place. Like, honestly, like, let's make it real simple. The first thing you need to do, the first solution is everybody needs to know their purpose. And then live in that. Your only responsibility is to live in your purpose. God created you to do a very specific thing. Out of all the little spermies that were all making their way to where they was trying to get to, yours is the one that made it. God had a whole list, and he was like, all right, this what they're going to produce? Yes, I want that. So you had a validated purpose. The second, like, before your parents even looked each other in the eye, God had a plan for you.
Yeah.
Who are you to not live in what God has created you to do? Who are you to not have the faith in God who so graced you with his grace to continue to live even though your imperfect ass is fucking up every other day?
Facts.
So the least you could do is thank God by living in your purpose. So live in your purpose. And in doing that, do it with kindness and consideration for other people, because they are opportunities for you to live in your purpose.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to be the trumpet, be the trumpet, be the symbol, be the symbol. Like, be who you are in praise of God.
Yeah.
That's the
And
work.
accept
Instead,
everybody
not
else,
money.
like you said.
Yep.
Everybody is a part of the body.
Mm-hmm. And it
Who
ain't
am I
about
to say?
worshiping something else, some clothes,
I don't
some
need an
money,
eye.
some things. It's about doing the work of worshiping the thing that created you.
Yeah.
Create. God created you to create.
Well, with that being said, it's time to end the show. So y'all already know. Bring another set of ears for next week's show. This is RoyalFlexTheBrand's Introspective Insight Talk Show. I am KingDevDoe.
Takia.
Haley.
See y'all next week.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. Introspective Insight. Hope you come back next week.
Come back next week.